Hello students, this is a PowerPoint on the background information that you need to know to be able to access Persepolis. This screencast will have two parts. On the notes page that you got sent through email, this first part of the PowerPoint will cover that first page, and then the second and third page will be covered in the second part of the PowerPoint. Let's get started. So the first thing you need to know about Persepolis is the geography. Persepolis takes place in Iran. That's the location. So as you notice on your notes page, in the first box you should see a place in which you can write down location. And the location is Iran. Iran is in a geographical region called the Middle East, which I believe you have studied in your world history class. The Middle East includes countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all these countries here. You notice that Iran borders Iraq here on the west. And you should also notice that Iran borders Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan on the east. To give you an idea of how big Iran is, because it does seem like it is a fairly big Middle Eastern country. If you look over here, here's this dark pink outline of Iran, and it's superimposed on the United States. Iran, in comparison to the U.S., is about 1/3 the size of the United States, just to give you an idea of how big it is. Let's keep going. Iran has some important cities and an important religion. So you should notice that all these little dots here indicate a city. You should notice that one, instead of a dot, has a star. That's the first important city we're going to talk about. That is Tehran. Another important city is no longer on the map, but exists right about here to the west of Shiraz. That city is called Persepolis, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Tehran, as you notice, is the capital of Iran. Persepolis, which again was over here, was the ancient capital of Iran. You should also notice all over the map these little moons. Some are green, some are white. We'll talk about the importance of that later, but the little moons you should know as a symbol of Islam, which is the predominant religion of Iran. And Islam has two sects. So there's the Shia Muslims, also spelled Shiite, but it can also be spelled the way you see it here. And then there are the Sunni Muslims. If you notice up here, most of the moons are green, which means that most of the Muslims are Shia in Iran. So Iran is predominantly Shiite. Now, in terms of industry, Iran has a lot of industries that they use to make money. You'll notice that there's a lot of red here. The red, all these little lines here, they indicate oil fields. So Iran's main industry is oil. And if you also notice, most of the oil fields are located on the west. And if you remember from our first slide, that is the border that Iran shares with Iraq. This is Persepolis. Persepolis, as you remember, was the ancient capital of Iran. These are the ruins of Persepolis. Persepolis no longer stands. When you look at it, you should remember that Iran was a civilization, right? It's an ancient civilization. And if you notice, you'll see this right here should remind you kind of Egypt. And then the ruins here, the columns, should remind you of like the Greek ancient civilizations. So the architecture resembles Egyptian architecture and Greek architecture, which symbolizes that Iran used to be very powerful. Now, in terms of the development of Iran, there was a lot of migration, I think you learned in world history, that populated the continents of Europe and Asia. Specifically for Iran, we're going to be talking about the Indo-European migration. If you notice this group here, you should notice that there are a lot of arrows coming out of the Indo-European section. The Indo-Europeans were a group of people that were from an area between the Black Sea here and the Caspian Sea here. And they moved around and they spread out throughout Europe and Asia. So this is why Iranians, or as sometimes they are called Persians, because Persia was the ancient name of Iran, Persians are not Arab. You should hear a lot of people referring to people from the Middle East as being Arab, right? Just like people from Latin America are Latinos, or people from Europe are Europeans. A lot of people from the Middle East are Arab, not the Iranians, or again, the Persians. Because they came from the Indo-European people, they are not of Arab descent. And again, because they came from the Indo-European people, who, as you notice, spread all over Europe, their key physical characteristics of the Persians are that they have lighter skin and have more European features. We're now going to go through some key terms. I'm going to put up the slide of the key terms. Go through them. You should feel free to pause whenever needed to copy these down on your notes. The first key term is a coup d'etat. That is a French word that means a sudden overthrow of the government. Usually a coup d'etat is done by people who work within the government, and then they rebel against the leader and they find a way to overthrow them, and they themselves take power. A Shah, you'll hear that word a lot. Shah is the title of the king of Iran, and we're going to be talking about two different Shahs that Iran had. An Ayatollah is a religious leader, specifically a Shiite religious leader. Remember how we talked about Shiite can be spelled like this, or as you saw in the previous slide, S-H-I-A. An Ayatollah is one of their leaders, much like a pope would be a leader for Catholicism. Parliament is kind of like our Congress here in the U.S. Congress has the Senate and the House of Representatives. And Parliament is a government group that makes laws. You can also, instead of having a parliament, have an absolute monarchy. And again, this is something that should be familiar to you because of what you learned in world history. But an absolute monarchy is a government where the king or queen is the ultimate leader. Whatever they say goes. A different version of a monarchy is a constitutional monarchy. And a constitutional monarchy is a government where the king, queen has to work with another governmental body. So they can make decisions, but they have to run those decisions by another group, usually Parliament. Few more. Prime Minister. Prime Minister is the leader of an elected government. You can think about it kind of like our president. The West, notice how the W here is capitalized. That means we're not talking about the direction, we're talking about an area. Whenever you see West capitalized, we're talking about an area. It refers to the U.S. and other countries in Western Europe. You're going to see that the West and the Middle East, which is our next term, there's some tension between those two areas. The Middle East, as you probably already know, refers to countries in southwestern Asia and northern Africa. So Libya, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, countries we've talked about in our first slide. Nationalism is to have pride in one's country. So if you're a proud American, that's nationalism. If you're a proud Salvadorian, that's nationalism. Republic, democracy, we're going to treat them interchangeably. You're going to hear a lot in the text and in the movie the word republic. And that just simply, think about it as a democracy, the government in which you live in. And a democracy and a republic are a country where people hold the power to elect a leader, which means people can vote. In a theocracy, people might still be able to vote, but the government is run by religious leaders. To give you some contrast, here in this country, while we can teach you facts about religion, we cannot teach you to believe or adhere to or follow a specific religion, right? We'll teach you about religion in historical terms and how it applies to our studies, but we do not have permission to make you believe a certain thing. A theocracy is the opposite. In a theocracy, in schools, in everything that they do, the purpose is to get people to believe and to follow a certain religion. Final key term slide. A martyr. A martyr is a person who is killed because of their religious beliefs. So many times a martyr dies defending their religious beliefs. I don't want you to get confused with people who die for their regular beliefs. So like if people die defending their country, that's not considered a martyr because it's not tied to religion. A martyr needs to have died and he should have put themselves purposefully in a situation where they could die because of their religious beliefs. Exile should sound familiar to you if you've ever read Romeo and Juliet, because Romeo was exiled. It just means to be kicked out of your home country. Capitalism is a system in which we live in. So if you think of a company like Google, the people who made Google are incredibly rich. They had this business. They're owned by these private owners, right? These guys who want to make money. So while I benefit from the products that Google makes, I don't get richer because of Google. The people who invented Google do. That's the opposite of nationalization, not to be confused with nationalism. Remember, if it ends in SM, it is pride in your country. But nationalization is when a private company, so think of oil, which is one of the companies we talked about with Iran. If the government owns the oil company, it nationalized the oil industry. And that means whatever money the oil industry makes goes to the government. Presumably then the government distributes that money out to the people in forms of building roads or building buildings, things like that that help the country. At this point, you're now ready to stop this part of the PowerPoint, and you are now going to watch another screencast of the first 10 minutes of the movie. You should have these notes out because they will help you better understand the movie. In addition, there is a movie analysis handout that you're going to be completing, which requires you to at some point stop the movie and listen for key terms and define those key terms to the best of your ability. You're going to be writing a paragraph using those key terms later. Okay, so I hope this helps. Now watch the movie and then you'll finish the rest of the PowerPoint. Thank you.